What might be the impacts of high-end climate change on Scotland? Scotland has a strong commitment to addressing climate change. The 2009 Scotland Climate Change Act is one of the world's most ambitious strategies to combat the effects of climate change on the environment and people's health and well-being.
Because it's ultimately behavioural change that will make sure that we're on the path that we need to be on in order to halt the worst impacts of climate change.
The Scottish case study focused on the implications that different climate and socio-economic changes would have on key sectors, including agriculture, forestry, water, biodiversity, health and tourism. The aim was to provide evidence for national decision makers and develop integrated solutions, strategies and transition pathways that lead to a shared vision of a sustainable future. So what could a future above 2 degrees Celsius look like in Scotland? In the first scenario, a strong and effective government results in Scotland successfully transitioning to a sustainable society. Although the impact of climate change remains moderately high, with temperatures rising by about 2.2 degrees, by the year 2100, Scotland has become an environmentally sustainable, independent country, with core values of social justice and equality.
If Scotland chooses to be that kind of equitable, world-leading country in terms of climate change adaptation and a social justice that it seems to have a tendency to now, then I think that SSP1 could be quite a realistic scenario in the future.
In the second scenario, a hugely unequal society is divided into the haves and have-nots. Multinational corporations are extremely powerful, whilst government and ordinary people can only afford to think about their short-term survival. Climate change is extreme, with temperatures increasing by almost 4 degrees Celsius. In the third scenario, a strong middle class fuels technological innovation and responsible use of resources, keeping the average temperature rise below 2.5 degrees Celsius. However, social unrest is brewing due to increased inequality and a lack of governmental responsibility. The fourth scenario sees the use of fossil fuels driving technological and economic progress. Although initially Scotland is able to cope with the extreme changes in climate, eventually environmental degradation reaches a tipping point and society is forced to shift to more sustainable development.
Because the magnitude of climate change in the future in Scotland is not so great, actually that means that the effects of socio-economic change become amplified and much more important relatively. And what we were finding is that by looking across at these range of different scenarios, we were having very, very different outcomes.
These scenarios bring about a number of impacts associated with a future above 2 degrees Celsius. Forest productivity is projected to increase due to a warmer climate. However, not all tree species will benefit equally. The yields of native Scots pine are projected to decrease, while the yields of some non-native species could increase. This could affect biodiversity, landscapes and tourism. Agriculture and crop yields are projected to be impacted by the changing climate and socio-economic developments. In each scenario, there's a mix of agricultural benefits and losses across different crops and across the country. The scenarios have implications for biodiversity, with some habitats increasing and others decreasing in size. The golden eagle could benefit from this change. However, the osprey, wildcat and other species could lose substantial areas of suitable habitat. Scottish landscapes are likely to be affected by climate change and socio-economic developments. However, the new landscapes are expected to remain attractive to visitors. In all scenarios, Lyme disease infection rates are projected to increase as tick populations expand in the warmer climate. The flow of the Tay River, Scotland's largest waterway, is projected to be altered, potentially causing flooding and habitat changes. Faced with these projected impacts, the Impressions Project worked with stakeholders to develop a shared vision for Scotland in the year 2100. And to help achieve this vision, a range of pathways and transformative solutions were created that move each scenario closer to the vision of a more sustainable future. Of these pathways, 3 in particular were identified as being crucial to underpinning all other pathways across each of the scenarios. The first of these is integrated environmental planning and resource management. Managing trade-offs between competing land uses and developing mutually beneficial synergies, including nature-based solutions, would improve Scotland's coping capacity. Empowering local communities by devolving responsibility to the local level would allow people to make sustainable decisions over key areas of their lives. Local low-carbon and circular economies would enable communities to develop sustainable food sources and economic activities. The case study also developed a number of policy recommendations for decision-makers. Assessing how changes in tree species could help ensure the viability and productivity of forests. Examining land use trade-offs through cross-sectoral impact assessments. This would include assessing the impact that ambitious reforestation programs could have on local food production, biodiversity, and landscapes. Supporting sustainable farming practices to help reduce biodiversity losses. Raising awareness of Lyme disease amongst the public and health practitioners. These and other actions will help Scotland address the causes of climate change, adapt to the impacts, and move towards a more sustainable future.
Society has a choice about the direction it wants to follow. And that's again why it was important to engage with stakeholder communities, because these are people engaged in decision-making processes who can have an influence on the future trajectory of Scotland going forward.
There's been a lot of useful research done by the team, by the Impressions team, and some of the outputs will be a lot more insightful than the kind of climate information and socio-economic information that has been generally available. So I can use some of this to explain to decision makers within the business, within Scottish Water, about the potential impacts and how we can prepare for that.